Lord Toby Young, Tory peer, Vice Chair of the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Free Speech and founder, of course, of the Free Speech Union. Toby, very good morning to you. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning.
Obviously a big free speech week after what happened at Glastonbury at the weekend, where the rapper concerned, Bob Vylan, I suppose he's only one half of Bob Vylan, has come out and said that he's being victimised because he was speaking out. He's had his contract dropped by his agents. He has his visa taken away from his trip to the United States of America. I don't know whether it's going to end up being a good career move for him or a bad career move for him. But I'm assuming you would sort of defend his right to say what he said.
Yes, I would. I mean, I think it was pretty abhorrent, pretty unsavoury, and borderline racist.
Yeah.
And had he launched into a rant using the P word or the N word and been part of a white rapping skinhead duo, I think the BBC would have pulled the plug,
yeah,
and his career would now be over. I mean, anti-Semitism is weirdly almost now an acceptable form of racism at places like Glastonbury. But nevertheless, I would defend his right to say it, and I don't think he should be prosecuted. I mean, the test I like to apply here, Mike, is what's called the Brandenburg test, which dates back to a famous Supreme Court case in the US called Brandenburg versus Ohio. And under that test, speech should be protected unless it's going to lead to imminent lawless action. That is, unless you can show with some confidence that it's going to lead to an outbreak of violence. And even though what Bob Vylan chanted was deeply unpleasant, nevertheless, I don't think it's going to lead to an outbreak of violence against the IDF. So according to the Brandenburg test, that speech should be protected by the First Amendment. Now, we don't have a First Amendment in this country, so it may be that it's prosecutable nonetheless, and there's an issue about whether you should prosecute someone like Lucy Connolly but not Bob Vylan. I think Lucy Connolly's speech was also protected by the Brandenburg test, and if we had a First Amendment in this country, she wouldn't have been prosecuted either. Right. But it is, I think, quite hard to argue that what Lucy Connolly said constituted stirring up racial hatred against a particular racial group, given that asylum seekers aren't really a racial group. No. But to say that it was, in her case, a stirring up racial hatred offence, but not in his case. But I mean, in his case, the IDF's not really a racial group either. It's a military organisation. So there does appear to be a double standard here. My position is neither should be prosecuted. But if you're going to prosecute one, it doesn't make much sense to bang Lucy Connolly up for 31 months, but to let Bob Vylan off scot-free.
Yeah. And the other argument about, yes, he was talking about death to the IDF. However, by association, he's also possibly inciting violence against Jewish people, isn't he? Because, if you were a Jewish person in that crowd, and I think I've spoken to a couple of people who were at Glastonbury, and they said it was pretty intimidating, and if, for example, there might have been, I don't know, a stall outside of that particular concert venue when they were watching Bob Vylan, suddenly that had a couple of Israeli flags on it or something like that. Do you not think that somebody would have been incited to do something to that?
Well, I don't think any Jewish people or anyone holding an Israeli flag was attacked at Glastonbury. So, I mean, it may be that the police decide to prosecute Bob Vylan nonetheless and claim that he was stirring up hatred against a racial group. But I think his defence counsel will argue that there's a distinction between Jews on the one hand and the IDF on the other. I mean, it's a pretty thin distinction, as you say. Most of the Jewish population of Israel are technically members of the IDF, including some teenagers. Right. So it was effectively calling for the genocide of the Jewish population in that part of the Middle East. But I think he could nevertheless mount a pretty good defence. I think we could have mounted a pretty good defence in Lucy Connolly's case and argued, no, she's not guilty of stirring up racial hatred because asylum seekers are made up of many different ethnic groups, not just one. And in any event, they're not defined by their membership of an ethnic group. They're defined by the fact that they're seeking asylum in our country. But unfortunately, Lucy, as we know, pleaded guilty, which is one of the reasons.
And that seems to be the thing that most people who are in favour of her being locked up now kind of fall back on. Whenever you get into a row with anyone on social media about whether Lucy Connolly should be freed, it's always they always say, "Oh yeah, but she pleaded guilty to a very serious offence." But we all now know that she was persuaded to do that because she thought that would help her probably to get home quicker.
Yeah, that's right. I think she unwisely pled guilty, and she pled guilty to a particular manifestation of the stirring up racial hatred offence, which was intending to stir up serious violence against a particular racial group, and that carries a higher tariff. And that's one of the reasons she got 31 months from the judge, because she'd pled guilty to probably the most serious form of the stirring up hatred offence. I mean, it was very unwise, and had she pled not guilty, I think she might well have been acquitted. We know that Jamie Michael, the former Royal Marine, he was in touch with the Free Speech Union after he was charged with stirring up racial hatred for a 12-minute Facebook video he posted in the aftermath of the Southport attacks. With our advice, he pled not guilty. We paid for his defence, and it took a jury all of 17 minutes to unanimously acquit him. And I think that Lucy Connolly might well have been acquitted too had she pleaded not guilty. And I think, I mean, I was very disappointed that when the Free Speech Union paid for her appeal, the High Court judges, 3 High Court judges, concluded that her sentence wasn't manifestly excessive. I mean, we made the case that there are mitigating circumstances here. She deleted the tweet within 4 hours. She apologized for it. She was traumatized because she'd lost an 18-month child herself due to NHS negligence. So she found the death of 3 schoolgirls in Southport particularly triggering. But none of those things were considered relevant mitigating factors by the High Court, so they didn't overturn the sentence, which was deeply disappointing. And now she's got to continue to remain in prison until August. She'll be out now in about August.
Right. As long as they don't try and get her to sort of retaliate in some way, which, according to Richard Tice, they might be trying to make her do. What about the BBC's role in all of this? Because, I mean, you could argue as well that the BBC, while, you know, not necessarily wittingly doing so, were broadcasting this ghastly message of about the IDF to the world. You know, they were live streaming it. It wasn't, you know, the plug wasn't pulled, as it were. So they could technically be accused of promulgating it.
Yeah, no, I think the BBC are definitely at fault here. I mean, I think we have to distinguish between the question of, well, was this lawful free speech? And I think my understanding of the law is that, yes, it was lawful. But that's not an excuse for the BBC to broadcast it. I mean, what the BBC broadcasts is not just anything that's lawful. It's a subset of what's lawful. And there are other standards that apply here. You know, it may be lawful to call for the death of the IDF and to say things like, I hear people want their country back. Well, you can't have it, which is something else Bob Vylan said on stage. And he also referred to Zionists in the music industry, which sounded like, you know, a euphemism for Jews, and reviving the old trope that the Jews control the music industry. So I think for a variety of reasons, it was very unwise for the BBC to broadcast it. And when he started saying these things on stage, they should have pulled the plug. And as I said earlier, Mike, had he been a white skinhead rapper and started ranting against, you know, the P word and the N word, then I think they would have pulled the plug without hesitation.
Yeah, and he'd probably be sitting in a prison cell at this very moment, having been arrested straight away as soon as he walked off the stage. But, you know, that's another story indeed. Toby, great to see you. Thank you very much indeed. Lord Toby Young, Tory peer, Vice Chair of the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Free Speech.